Subnetting with VLSM, example number 2. This time we have a company that uses a public range 176.33.202.0/23. They want to create smaller subnets, and these are their requirements. 2 point-to-point subnets, one subnet with 100 hosts, 3 subnets where each subnet has 4 hosts, and then 2 subnets where each subnet has 13 hosts. Again, we're going to start with a table and we're going to sort the subnets from the largest one to the smallest one. This time I've counted in the network ID and the broadcast IP address. So instead of just copying the requirement that said we need, for example, for the first subnet 100 hosts, I'm saying here we actually need 102 IP addresses, and same goes for all the other subnets. All right, let's dig in. So the first network ID for the first subnet is going to be 176.33.202.0. And this is what that looks like in binary format. So in the very beginning, in the requirement, we got /23 mask. So this is 23 bits that represent the network portion. And those are the underlined bits in this representation right here. Next thing we need to determine is how many host bits we're going to use to be able to create 102 different combinations. We'll go with 7 bits because 2 to the power of 7 is 128. And that is good enough for us because we need only 102. So our new mask is going to be /25. We got that from 32 minus 7. That's exactly 25. So that's the 25 network bits in our new subnet. To calculate the broadcast IP, we're going to switch these 7 host bits into 7 ones. In total, the fourth octet is 127, and since the first 3 octets haven't changed, our broadcast is 176.33.202.127. Range of usable IP addresses goes from 1 to 126. And the network ID of our second subnet is going to be 176.33.202.128. And this is what that looks like in binary format. So only the first bit is switched on. This first bit has a value of 128. We're going to go ahead and use 4 host bits, which means that our mask is going to be /28. 2 to the power of 4 is 16, so we are a bit tight here, but it does meet our requirements for the second and third subnet, so we're going to go ahead with 4 bits. To calculate the broadcast IP, we're going to switch the last 4 bits into 4 ones. In total, that's going to be 15 plus 128, which is 143. So the broadcast IP is 176.33.202.143. And then the range goes from 129 to 142. Our next network ID is 176.33.202.144, and the mask remains the same. This is what that looks like in binary format. And then when we switch the host bits into ones, we get the broadcast IP 176.33.202.159. Range of usable IP addresses goes from 145 to 158. Next subnet's network ID is 176.33.202.160. This is what that looks like in binary format, and this time we're going to use 3 host bits. 2 to the power of 3 is 8, and that satisfies our requirements for our next 3 subnets. When we switch the last 3 bits into ones, we're going to get 167 in our last octet, so that's our broadcast IP. And then the range goes from 161 to 166. Now we're going to go a bit faster for the next 2 subnets. So first of all, the mask remains the same. It's going to be /29. And then the network ID for our 5th subnet is going to be 168. Now, this is pure math. So if we can only create 8 different IP addresses in our 4th subnet, that means we can just add 8 to that network ID and get the next network ID. That's what we're going to do for our 6th subnet. So 168 plus 8 is 176. So those are the network IDs. The 6th subnet is also going to have a total of 8 IP addresses. So the next network ID for our next subnet is again going to be that network ID plus 8, which in this case is 184. Now we can cheat a little bit with the broadcast IPs. So the broadcast IP for this subnet, let me see, that's the 5th subnet. So the broadcast IP for this subnet is going to be 175 because that's network ID of the next subnet minus 1. And then the next broadcast IP is going to be 183. The ranges we don't really care about anymore. Hopefully you got how we determine the ranges of usable IP addresses. The last 2 networks are point-to-point networks. So that's even easier. We can go one by one. So network ID is 184, and then the range of usable addresses is 185 to 186. And then the broadcast IP is the next address, 187. Last but not least, network ID is going to be 176, 33, 202, 188. The 2 usable addresses are going to be 189 and 190. And then the broadcast IP is going to be 191.